I think one of the concepts that is the hardest for parents to wrap their mind around is the fact that there is no such thing as a standard education. And I think when it comes to high school, it is doubly difficult for parents to let go of this idea that there is some specific standard that their children are supposed to be achieving simply because they are now in high school. If this is something that you have found yourself struggling with, then I hope today's video will help kind of start to unprogram you from thinking that way. And at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you about a resource that can help you get the rest of that false programming out of your brain so that your homeschool, particularly in the high school years, is much, much less stressful. Now, I think the main reason that parents struggle with this concept so much in the high school years specifically is because college is looming on the horizon, right? And because we know colleges have very specific requirements for what kids need to have on their transcript in order to apply, we start thinking, okay, we need to make sure they have all of these things, right? But here is truth number one that I want you to think about. College requirements don't mean anything outside of college. And when you really think about it, why do they require so many general, broad bodies of information for every single child, regardless of what they're going into for their major? It's ridiculous. Why do they expect that every child should have 4 credits of English and every child should have 4 credits of or 3 credits of math and 3 of science, whatever the requirements are these days? If you have a child who's not going into anything STEM related, then why on earth would we force them to spend time taking classes that aren't going to help them in real life? Isn't the whole point of an education to prepare our children for the real world? If we are forcing them to do things that not only are irrelevant to them, but are things that they frankly don't enjoy, that they don't excel at, that they don't see the point in, then are we not just setting ourselves up for tons of contention and arguments, right? College is not the right choice for a large percentage of kids. I would say the tide is shifting to the point where college is not the right choice for most kids. There are so many options that are available for kids in terms of careers and jobs and things that they can do with their life that have absolutely nothing to do with a bachelor's degree. And for us to see that those requirements are specific only to that institution helps us to realize, okay, why would I make my child do this? Why would I hold them to these standards when these standards mean nothing for them, right? So the idea that, oh, because college requires it, it must be somehow official, it must be super important. No, it has nothing. College requirements have nothing to do half the time with the things that kids are even going to study once they get there. So why would we make them requirements for kids who probably aren't even going to go to college? We need to separate what education is and how we approach it with our kids from this very hyper-specific situation that we don't even know our kids are going to have anything to do with. So I think that's the first thing, the first reason why so many of us struggle. And it's the first thing we need to let go of is this idea of college prep and college requirements somehow being a very important and very official standard version of education. It's just simply not true. The second reason I think we get so concerned is because we know that in order to graduate high school in the public schools, they have very specific requirements. And in our minds, that diploma is a very official document. And it's official, yes, in the sense that when you've gotten it from a public school, it means that you have done what a state level agency thinks that you need to do. But again, why do we think that somehow makes it more important or more official than what we decide our children's high school education should look like? Not every state has the same requirements, right? They don't have the same requirements for any grade level. They don't have the same requirements for what information has to be in each class that your child takes. So what education they would get in New Jersey would be different from the education they get in North Dakota, right? So the fact that not even the schools all have the exact same thing should show us that no, there is not one specific official education that all children should be trying to acquire. And not only that, but I think parents tend to assume that since the public schools are requiring it, it must be really important. But that is not true at all. The public schools are built on a very specific approach and philosophy. And that approach and philosophy are no better, no more standard, no more official than any other approach to education that you can choose to take. You can choose to homeschool in a public school way. You could choose to homeschool in like the complete opposite way. And guess what? Those are both viable and legitimate approaches to education. One is not more official or better than the other. Well, actually, I think pretty much almost any approach is better than public school approach, but that's just me. So do not fall into this trap of thinking that, oh, public school, because public school requires it, it must be official and really important. There is tons that they teach in the public schools that is not only not important, but it's frankly ridiculous. And the last truth that we need to grasp is the fact that individuals are all unique and their education should be just as unique as them. There is very little that every single person needs to know, right? When you think about all the information out there in the world, what things do everybody need to know? They need to know how to read. They need to know how to communicate. They need to know how to do basic math, right? If they can do those things, they can get along pretty well in the world. So when we think of it that way, we can see that, okay, if that's our starting base of what everybody needs, then everything that we build onto that, it's just extras. It's all icing. It's like one of those cupcakes where the cupcake is this big and the icing is like this, right? Everything else is just icing. And so when we realize that, it can take this pressure off of us feeling like, oh, my child has to know all these things. Your child does not have to know all the things. Your child can't know all the things. All the things? Who in the world knows all the things? Nobody. Nobody knows all the things, right? Our children need to know what they need to know in order to function in the world, in order to do the things that they want to do. What does your child want to do after they graduate? That is the driving distinction for what you're going to do for their high school years. What are they going to study? They're going to study the things that will help them do that, whatever that is. And if they have absolutely no idea what they want to do, then you focus on the basics and then on exposing them to a variety of things to help them figure out what they do want to do. It doesn't mean making them memorize all sorts of information on each one of those things. That's silly. If they choose to eventually go into entrepreneurship, then forcing them to learn a bunch of stuff about marine biology doesn't make any sense, right? But spending a week learning about marine biology to help them decide whether they want to go in that direction or not is time well spent, right? And it exposes them to information that is interesting and that might spark something with a hobby or might spark something of, kind of a pet project, maybe not something that they want to do forever as a job, but just stuff that's interesting to know. Right? We all have those little things that we are kind of experts in, even though we don't do them for a job, right? So our kids are no different. They are able to amass information on things that have no bearing on a job later in life that are just fun to learn. It's okay to let your kids just learn about fun stuff. Okay. So as you are looking at your child specifically, think about what that child needs, not about what is the standard education that everybody has to have, because there is no such thing. There is no such thing as the standard high school education. Now, if you want to keep deprogramming your brain from holding on to ideas that make homeschooling so much more difficult, then what you need to do is deschool. Deschooling is basically detoxing ourselves from the assumptions and the philosophy of conventional education. We all, regardless of how much time we spent in that system, we all have some detoxing to do because we are in a society that upholds conventional school as being the standard, even though it's not. So we have all been brainwashed to one degree or another to think that education has to look a certain way. And when we try to homeschool, that's when we come up against these preconceived notions and we have to dismantle them so that we can homeschool the way that our kids need us to homeschool them. So that process is called deschooling. I'm going to link two resources. One is an article that explains what exactly deschooling is and how it works and why it is so important. And then I'm going to also link to a resource that's going to help you accelerate and kind of turbo boost your deschooling process so that you can get way further down the road, get that stuff, that junk out of your brain super quick so that you can start homeschooling in a new way that will allow you to let go of all that junk and embrace your true homeschooling potential. Thank you so much. I hope this video helped you to kind of get past some of those preconceived notions. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button and I will talk to you again later. Bye.